Hey everyone, Afrodo Reviews here, helping you decide, is that book worth reading over second breakfast? Or does it deserve the fiery pits of Mount Doom? So that's what I hope you decide. Today's book is a sci-fi classic, Neuromancer. Yes, I love you. Neuromancer. Will you let me? Will you let me? Please? Please? Neuromancer is a 1980... I'll get it eventually. Neuromancer is a 1984 sci-fi novel written by William Gibson. This book has an interesting history behind it, at least so much so as many of the other books I've reviewed on this channel. For one, it's generally considered one of the oldest and best-known works in the cyberpunk genre. And if you've read, played, or watched any kind of movie that takes place in even a semi-cyberpunk setting, then you've likely seen stories influenced by this novel. It popularized the term cyberspace It popularized the term cyberspace for, the World Wide Web. God, speech impediment is not good when trying to say that. I'm sorry. And the acronym ICE, which is known for Intrusion Countermeasure Electronics. So if you've heard those two terms before, you can thank this book for that. Although the term cyberspace was supposedly even coined by Gibson himself, though not in this work, but in an earlier novelette. I'm just gonna say novelette because that sounds right, but I think it might be novelette, called Burning Chrome. John Womack, author of works such as the Draco series, I don't think I've ever read any of his stuff, but that's what I found, is even noted as saying that Gibson's depiction of the internet in Neuromancer may have even influenced the way the World Wide Web would eventually come to be. Because, fun fact, Neuromancer was written only 1 year after the official birthday of the internet in general, and almost 10 years before the World Wide Web, that is, the internet we all access, would come to be. In addition to that, on a literary basis, the book has some In addition to that, on a literary basis, this book has some commendations that are definitely worth noting. Like the fact that this book is the only novel that's won the Nebula Award, the Philip K. Dick Award, and the Hugo Award. This feat is largely attributed to legitimizing the cyberpunk genre as a mainstream subgenre of science fiction in general. And, my god, the amount of adaptations this book has received. If I could whistle, I would put it right here, but I can't actually whistle, so... See, that there leads kind of to another funny thing. For as often as they tried to adapt this work, very few of the adaptations actually managed to make it in their medium of choice. To go over the various ones that I found... Hey, stop licking the table. It received a graphic novel adaptation by Epic Comics in 1989, though only the first 2 chapters were adapted before the graphic novel discontinued, and it never finished. In addition, sometime in the 1990s, a version of Neuromancer was published as one of the Voyager Company's expanded book series of Hypertext Annotated Hypercard Stacks for the Apple Macintosh. Though, to be honest, I'm not sure if this counts as an adaptation or merely a weird kind of republishing. I'm not old enough to have owned a Macintosh, so I apologize. On to more for sure adaptations of this work. It also received a video game adaptation in 1988 by Interplay, which has the same setting and themes, but ultimately ended up changing the characters and the plot itself. So I guess it's less of an adaptation and more of an inspired by kind of work. Supposedly a sequel to the game was going to come out, but their plans were too advanced for the technology at the time. And, to be fair, very little evidence actually supports that any work was actually done on a sequel. So, take that for what it's worth. Apart from a psychologist that was contacted to advise during the sequel, I couldn't find any other hints that the sequel was actually in production. And we're not even close to done. On September 8th and 15th of 2002, BBC World Service Drama produced and aired 2 one-hour parts of a Neuromancer adaptation. In addition, in Finland, Ye Radio Tirotel. I will be putting this as a caption because I don't know how to say this properly. It doesn't help that you're in my face either. Produced a 4-part radio play of Neuromancer, though I could find no dates for this one. In addition, the BBC World Service drama one was on its archive, but was taken off, from what I could find. It's weird. Can I help you? This is what I deal with constantly. There have also been numerous audiobook readings of it. The first is from Gibson himself, who actually read an abridged version of his book for audio cassettes for Time Warner Audiobooks. An unabridged version of this book was read by Arthur Addison and made available from Books on Tape in 1997. In 2011, Penguin Audiobooks produced a new unabridged recording of the book, read by Robertson Dean. The final audiobook, at least the one that I could find, was published in 2021, an unabridged version, and was read by a Jason Fleming. I think it's Fleming because there's a Y in there, but it could also be a silent Y, so it could be Fleming. Again, I don't know how to say that name. Surprisingly enough, despite the amount of pop culture, despite the amount of mainstream movies that were inspired by this book, like The Matrix or Blade Runner, or you just gotta lick me every time it comes near. There is no film adaptation of this work specifically, though apparently it wasn't for lack of trying. Drafts of scripts were written by British director Chris Cunningham and Chuck Russell, though this died before it ever came to fruition, despite Gibson's own belief that Cunningham is the only director who had a chance to do the film correctly. In May 2007, reports emerged that Joseph Kane, best known for his work on Torque, I've never seen it myself, had been aligned as a director, had been signed on as a director, with Mila Jovovich set to star. But then 3 years later, it was reported that Vincino, I think that's how it's pronounced, Vincino Natali, known for Cube and Splice, was taking over director duties and was rewriting the screenplay. Offers were made to Liam Neeson and Mark Wahlberg as casting choices, and rumors of this version lasted until 2017. Then, in August of the same year, Tim Miller was signed on to be the director. Tim Pool of Deadpool fame was signed on as the director of a new film adaptation by Fox, with Simon Kinberg producing. And that was the last we've ever heard of this, at least the last that I could find. I do books, I don't do heavy film research, I apologize. But seriously, if you think that's all of the adaptations, you are still wrong. Because this book attempted to do an opera adaptation. Neuromancer the Opera is an adaptation written by Jane Winger, I think it's pronounced Winger, and Mark Lowenstein, Liberato, and Richard Marriott of the Clubfoot Orchestra. A production was scheduled to open on March 3rd, 1995 at the Julia Morgan Theater, now known, I guess, as the Julia Morgan Center for the Arts, in Berkeley, California, featuring Clubfoot Orchestra in the pit and extensive computer graphic imagery created by a worldwide network of volunteers. However, this premiere did not take place, and the work has yet to be formed in full. Well, with that, I mean, damn, what else is there to say about this book? Other than when I tried to read it, I didn't understand a word of it. Well, that's not fair. I understand words of it, but it was a very confusing book. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I disliked the book, necessarily, just that I honestly did not understand what the fuck was going on in this book, what it was going on about at certain moments. It comes dangerously close to feeling like having a fever dream, and several times I just sat back and had to say, alright then, I don't know what the fuck just happened. Seriously, the only note I have in one of my note-taking apparatuses is just noting that I did not understand a thing that just happened between pages 92 and 93 in this book. Because it was like I decided to just snort a handful of Peruvian marching powder, eat a sandwich of funny mushrooms, and then take the biggest rip of the devil's lettuce that I could possibly manage before I tried to read the scene. And it's not the only scene where I had to sit back and think to myself, what? What? Again, I'm not saying this is a bad book. When I found the book coherent and understandable enough, it was a genuinely good read. I understood what the main plot was, and I got a fair idea of what the stakes were supposed to be. But I mean, I can't really say I enjoyed myself while reading, The jerky way this is written, with how it jumps from setting to setting to situation so often, makes my eyeballs spin. And then when you're in these areas, sometimes it overloads you with information on it, but then other times it's super vague. Like, I'm still not completely sure if this one area in the book called Zion is supposed to be in space. Is it a colony or on a moon, or is it a space station colony? And as I hinted at earlier, page 92 to 93, I still don't know what the hell was supposed to happen in that part. I feel like it was supposed to be important, but I also found the characters to be kind of hollow. Case never felt like an active protagonist, which would make sense in the beginning after his neurosystem has been fried and he can't get into the Matrix anymore, where he was just kind of coasting through life and has something of a death wish, that kind of just expecting to die and not really caring if he does. But even after he gets his ability to jack back into the Matrix, he still just kind of coasts through the book. He never felt active or passionate despite all the words he said and all that was said to him. Molly, the street samurai, just feels like what a horny teenager would write when you give them the prompt, cyberpunk street samurai. And the chemistry between the two of them is so bad, I swear to God, I could see Molly look off screen at her script before their first adult spicy scene together. Though, to be completely fair, Gibson himself has also stated that this book could have been written by an adolescent. So, maybe that was intentional. But Gibson also has this weird way of introducing characters where he'll drop someone in, give them a few sentences of description, leave them be for a little bit, but then come back and give them even more description, sometimes a lot more. Because he does that, it often conflicts with the mental image I formed of that character already, which, with all this new information added on this character, I was forced to stop, break my immersion, readjust how I saw this character in my head, which gave me a headache at times because he would do this more than once, before I could continue and keep reading about this character. And then there's some characters who are just kind of thrown in front of you and you're just kind of expected to know who it is. I believe, for some reason I'm forgetting his name, but it's like the random robot helper that Case has whenever he goes into cyberspace. For the longest time, I didn't realize like he was a robotic helper, and it just sort of felt like it was just randomly this person would appear and start talking to him. And let me tell you this, if you do not know your techno jargon, you are going to be lost. Legitimately. It felt like this book was written in a way where you read the book here and have a glossary open here to the pages, so that you can be like, oh crap, what does that mean? Okay. Oh crap, what does that mean? Okay. Oh crap, what does that mean? Okay. It's kind of how it feels like the book wanted you to read it at times. So, oh my God, they are so dramatic, aren't they? They are so dramatic, aren't they? Honestly, this book feels like something whose reputation has exceeded it. It feels like a book that became famous back in the day, and that fame continued to mount to the point that it's more interesting than the book itself. I love the cyberpunk genre, everything from Blade Runner to Cyberpunk 2077. I'm one of the saps who pre-ordered Cyberpunk 2077. I've enjoyed all of these, but when it comes to the granddaddy of all cyberpunk, I was mostly just left confused and disappointed. I'm not really going to give the book a rating in light of that. I'm sure this is going to be a much more interesting and coherent read for someone far more prepared than I to tackle the book itself. But as it stands, I was just too confused to actually give this book a rating reflective of the actual work inside of it. I was lost for a good portion of it. I don't know what to say about the book in a way that gives it its fair due as a review. So as such, I'm not actually going to give it a rating and complete the review. In truth be told, it took me a lot longer to read than I thought it would, because although it only has 258 pages, I believe, 271 pages, it takes a lot to read at times. Like, there are certain pages that take you what feel like hours to read because of how convoluted it's been written. So, with that being said, that's really all I gotta say about this book. You know, enter this book at your own caution. I obviously wasn't prepared for it. I'm not gonna say it was a bad book in light of that, but I don't feel like I should have I need to have a glossary on hand to understand any book, personally. With that being said, tune in next time for the next book. It's gonna be Firefly. No one's guessing. No point in keeping in suspense. That being said, just remember, with every book comes an adventure, and every adventure is worth having. Even the bad ones.